This is Codified Wisdom. Sharp insights, no fluff, and real-world wisdom from leaders who want to get you further, faster. Now, here's your host, Eric Eager.
Welcome to Codified Wisdom, another great episode. And, for those, the idea that we explore the lessons learned, from great leaders, people who are shaping the profession and industries. And today's guest is Randy Johnston. And I've known Randy a long time, but I am telling you, he's one of the most respected voices in the accounting technology for decades. He's always been on the forefront of innovation in the profession. And what I love about Randy is that not only does he have a passion for the technology in the accounting and CPA profession, but he's just a giver of knowledge and he just enjoys helping people and firms and the whole profession. And he's literally helped thousands of firms navigate technology and cybersecurity and cloud adoption. And so if you've ever attended anything that was CPA tech, and for someone forward thinking, Randy is the person. And, I've had the honor of working and calling him a friend for a long time. So I couldn't be happier to have you on here talking with us, sharing experiences. And, Randy, thank you for taking the time to visit with us a little bit here on our podcast.
Well, Eric, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners today. And it turns out there's probably going to be some stories that we haven't told each other as we go. I'm pretty sure about that.
Well, as I do with all the people that enjoy coming on here and telling their stories, a lot of people, they know Randy today, but I want you to, go back in time and go back to the time, Randy's in college or maybe even, in high school. Tell us a little bit about like your journey to where you're at today. How did you, I bet did you plan on being this technology guru?
Well,
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I do appreciate the rather flowery introduction too, there, Eric. But there are a lot of things, and you are correct. There's no doubt about the passion I have for technology and for the accounting profession, and whether that's public practice accountants or industry accountants. Having dealt with, as you said, hundreds, literally thousands over multiple decades in both the U.S. and Canada. My rule of thumb has been if it's technology relating to accounting, I'm going to know about it and I'll help develop it where I can. So, since you want me to go into the Wayback Machine, well, that would be pre-internet. Okay. So many of your listeners are young enough. It's like there was a time before internet.
Yes, there was.
There definitely was. So it turns out pretty much all the way along, I've always wanted to do compute. Now, this is going to sound a little odd, but originally, the national crime computers, NCIC computers, really were ways to track crime patterns and try to figure out where the bad guys were at. And very sophisticated systems all running on mainframe computers. And I thought, I would really like to work on these NCIC computers because they're very cool. And I got the opportunity in the early 60s. So very specifically 1961. I got the opportunity to run on an IBM mainframe, and the friends there showed me how to, punch cards and compile programs and so forth. So as it turns out, I have been writing code for the better part of, 65 plus years. And it doesn't hurt our listeners to know that I wrote my first artificial intelligence on Lisp in 1975. So 50 years of doing artificial intelligence too. But I thought, oh yeah, this is really cool. And of course, the mainframes all ran on, raised floors with air conditioning. Of course, air conditioning in the 60s was a little unusual still. So, you'd go in and be cool and you'd have these very powerful machines. But I followed the path of what I called IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. So it was digital equipment and Unisys and or Burroughs in those earlier days and NCR and so forth. And it turns out I can work and still can work on all mainframes and all mini computers in the market. And I wound up writing P&L system for farmers cooperatives at Farmland Industries, also did a credit union system and a feedlot system and several different things. Were great projects. And then wound up writing a medical system, which is still in use, and a hotel and lodging systems, logistics still in use. And we sold that code that we wrote in those days on the Series 1 to Wausau, the insurance company. And that became the basis of us buying 10 Computerland franchises before the IBM PC was introduced. So because of that, Eric, I wound up getting the first PC in Kansas, IBM PC in Kansas, and the first compact portable, luggable in Kansas and so forth. So I just happened to be at the right place at the right time on a lot of this stuff. And again, not trying to do name dropping, but because of opportunity and age, most of the big names in the industry I've known or worked with. So Bob Metcalf, who invented Ethernet, or Steve Jobs and Wozniak at Apple, and Bill Gates at Microsoft, and kind of write down that type of list. And so, because I had this kind of odd technical background and the ability to also think solution solving, I wound up doing that. Wrote my first work in process for a CPA firm in 1972. So that also is a piece you probably wouldn't have known historically. But, in the early days, I also wrote college textbooks. So I have 6 titles, and that's what got me into public speaking, because the publishers wanted me to go on the road and promote the books. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. No, I don't mind writing the books, but standing up and speaking about them, that's a really, really bad idea. Yes, yes, sir, Andy, you need to do that. Oh, man, a book tour? I don't know. So, but because of that, I have been on college campuses all over the country and helped design a lot of the college curriculum. So the colleges of business that have a computer curriculum, I helped to design that one originally. And so forth. So you kind of hear that progression, but it's always been, Eric, about computers and how to use the technology in accounting. And that really evolved through mainframe down to mini, down to PC, back up through networking, through document management, through workflow, through accounting software, through tax and audit. And then it was financial reporting. That's how we first met, was obviously your predecessor company here, where, it's like, okay, I know all these accounting software products because I helped design a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
In financial reporting, it's weak. And yes, unfortunately, the classic FRX out of Colorado, out of Denver, I used to work with them, and you know them as well.
Oh, yeah.
But if you just start thinking about what all could we do with accounting technology and compute, that's kind of where I grew up from.
And, and then I'm going to dial it way back too. Where did you go to school? Where did you call home?
Mm-hmm.
Because our conversations, I knew that you're a big West Coast San Diego surfer guy. And no, I'm just kidding. Tell us, tell us about, where you call home, where you grew up, and then, when did you, catch the accounting bug also?
Yeah.
Because you got the technology. There's a lot of, but not many people have the accounting and the technology bug.
Yeah, good point. And the day that we are recording, this podcast webcast, would have been Mom's 102nd birthday, right? And so she lived over 100. And of course, I've always told people I want to be 102. At least I want to live that long. But I was born in Hutchinson, Kansas, and I've always lived in Hutchinson, Kansas. So I've got all the extended family right here. But went to a local community college, to Kansas State University, to Wichita State University, the University of Central Oklahoma, and actually have hours that I've either taken from or taught at universities in Virginia and Washington State and California and so forth. So yeah, I spent a bit of my time as a full-time academic instructor. That's really what led to writing all those college textbooks. But to the core answer, I actually had high school bookkeeping that got me started on that. Mr. Henderson was a fine person. It's like, yeah, I can kind of see how this would be fun to do. And it turns out when I was full-time college instructor, I was in head of the computer science department, but hung with the math and business instructors. And the head of the School of Business, I actually just saw at the National Community College basketball tournament again this year. We always chat, but I've known him a long time. So, we were all advising students going down this path of compute and business together. And so that's probably how it got there. So it started in high school, got through college that way, was teaching at the college level, installing networks, things like that, but then also teaching people how to use compute to do accounting. And we were one of the first schools or universities to actually run accounting on the local area network because we had one of the first ones in the state.
Well, and then, this experience, from, and we're going to get to talking about what the world looks like right now. But
Mhm.
in that journey of, mainframes, and then I'm dating myself a little bit of punch cards, somebody be walking across campus and like stumble and all of a sudden their program would be lost.
Yeah.
Um, but tell me about some of the lessons learned, as you've gone through, what were some pivot points? Was there any kind of points where you had to make a tough decision on going a particular pathway or not going a pathway on your journey you are today? And kind of what advice, looking back, would you give some people that maybe the next generation of accountants, in their adoption of technology? What
Yeah,
lessons did you learn along the way?
yeah, been there, done that. In fact, I've dropped many a punch card deck, and I can still read a punch card with no ink on it. I'm sure that's a saleable skill somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But yes, I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities and also made plenty of mistakes along the way. Usually I tell people I've just gone where I've been invited and sometimes haven't leveraged that maybe as much as I should have. But it was real clear every time there was a major change in technology, I embraced that. So when we went from mainframes to minis, I embraced that. When we went from minis to PCs, embraced that. Went from PCs to embrace that. So that would be maybe the first thing I'd say is change happens all the time. And one of the best things you can do is be always in discovery mode, a kind of a daily learner, a continuous learner. And every time that something new comes along, embrace that. So that's why right now, Eric, I'm doing plenty with AI, and you and I have talked about artificial intelligence, but also I am following along. I'm going to bend over in front of the camera for just a minute because, as you know, I actually like quantum computing. So
Yes, you
I
do.
was I was fortunate enough to have breakfast with Michio Kaku and his wife, and he insisted I walk away with a signed copy of the book. And I said, Michio, I've already got your book. He said, no, I want to give you one that's signed. And I thought that was very nice. And I said, well, that's good because now that I think about it, I've got a teenage granddaughter who's reading your book right now on quantum computing. So, I'm staying with this right now because of quantum. But here's the real deal. Uh, Things don't go right all the time. When we were running our franchise operations, and again, we had 10 computer lands and sold those and had 3 entrees. Yeah, when you're running a business, it's quite different than working for somebody else. And when you think about how many small businesses grow up to be big, or, the mechanics of working inside a big business, if you're working for somebody else, you're kind of most of the time told what to do or say, here's your job. But if you're working for yourself, you have to really have the discipline to choose the right things to do, not waste time on things that are not helpful. And, for me, I just happen to be lucky enough to be around at the start of the internet, at the start of databases, at the start of each of these technologies. And when I saw them happening, it's like, yeah, give me some of that. And so, what we would recommend is that you think about where you want to be when you grow up. Whereas, associate and I usually say, first, I'm never going to grow up. But second, I want to figure out what I'm going to be 2 years from now or 4 years from now. And when the sandbox gets full, go to a different sandbox. If everybody's doing what you're doing, you don't have a competitive advantage. So you need to think thoughtfully about where your next landing zone is. And, I don't want you going to the most current bright light. That is ineffective, but you need to thoughtfully head towards kind of the next target and be, long-term thinker about it. So that's why historically we've recommended, hey, get into databases, get into graphics, get into now artificial intelligence, because we know that that's a pretty significant long-term technology play.
So Randy, as we talk about that in the today's world, um, you have seen so many transformations, but right now in the accounting profession, there is more capital and more technology and more investment going into the profession. And you've helped guide firms through this. You know, where, you know, where are you seeing the opportunities ahead? What do you see in the profession? And, is it scary? Are you excited? What do you see now in the profession? And what do you see ahead for our CPAs or our friends that are now grappling with all this change? And it's so condensed, it's happening so fast that it's just hard to keep up. But what's your Randy Johnston looking at a year or two? For a lot of us who are trying to figure this stuff out, and we've quote unquote moved our cheese,
Yeah.
as they say.
Yeah. So as it turns out, Eric, I think this is actually more straightforward than many believe. So first off, in the world of public accounting, I don't believe that compliance, tax, and assurance is going away anytime soon. Now, there are plenty of opportunities in client accounting services, but I believe that that will be automated and possibly become a commodity. So the thing is that we have to move our practices to more, and a lot of people don't use the word right in my mind, advisory services. So it is client centric. And if you're doing advisory correctly, you're usually asking the question, what is an individual's plan? And then what is the business plan? And then what services can I provide you to help you grow on your plan? And in my world, Eric, I'm currently maintaining 100+ advisory services in a list. In fact, the call before our recording today was for a pretty large firm building an advisory practice and trying to help them understand what it's going to take to get that done. Now, the trick with advisory is it changes the relationship of the accounting professional from transactional back to relational. And I may think a little old school on this, but I think too many firms have become too transactional because of all of the money flowing in from PE and VC and not enough taking care of the clients. And, when you originally talked to me about your vision for impact data, trying to help small businesses grow and thrive and survive, I mean, all of those terms that you originally talked to me about, it's like, yeah, that's a very cool mission. And the fact of the matter is that I believe accountants globally are the real kingpins to making these small businesses grow and thrive. And the problem is a lot of business owners just want to do what they want to do. So, if you can get yourself in a position to use the trust that most clients have with you and guide them, that's the trick. So, in my world, it's advisory. Now, there's a couple other twists here, Eric, and they're important twists. We're seeing more automation and more AI, and we have had talent shortages in the profession over the last 5 years. They're a little eased up at this point, but they're eased up largely because firms have just turned to outsourcing. And I believe that there's going to be more repatriation of offshoring, outsourcing because of AI and automation. So what you need to do is position yourself and your firm where you automate everything that's possible for your clients and that you apply AI in an intelligent way to assist the clients. Now, remember, ultimately, the accountant and the client are responsible for the decisions, but you can get assistance. Just think of it as an intelligent assistant if you're using agentic AI to help you along. And some of the insights that you can get from advisory platforms like For Impact Data, that's a big deal as I see it. And there's not very many platforms in the market that can really provide these real advisory services as opposed to what I call fake advisory.
Well, again, you've been kind enough to give us advice and guidance and help us with the formation of making this vision a reality. Because what we've seen and what we continue to see is a lot of the platforms are helping do a lot of the work that we didn't like to do or it's just time consuming. But
Mhm.
what I hear over now is that clients are kind of great. I got my financial statements faster, more accurate. But I hate to say it bluntly, but they're like, so what? Now what?
Mhm.
And the role of the accountant, the trusted advisor we've always had, is now shifting to this help turn me from, don't think of me as a historian, which we all like to talk about financial trends, to a navigator. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that we've tried to do is now get you looking in the front windshield and equip advisors with this conversation via data to
Mhm.
predict, to recommend, see what's happening ahead, to guide people. What have you seen in this idea of now in advisory? Everybody talks about there's accounting services where there's a lot of capital, a lot of technology, but now it's going to transition to advisory services.
Mhm.
And um, where do you see the use of how we're doing it with the vision of equipping advisors to have a bigger impact across more clients?
Yeah, and likewise, the same tone that you just said, at the risk of sounding offensive on this, because I don't want to be. But you and I can read a set of financials pretty quickly. Show me the numbers, I can show you what the problem is. But many business owners can't do that. And frankly, income statement balance sheets, are, bayoneting the war, bayoneting the wounded after the war is over. They're backwards looking, as you say. And business owners, cash matters, but a financial, that's really, they first, they probably don't even know how to read it, but second, they don't know what it means and what to do with it. And that client accounting services can be so fully automated, the reconciliations, the download of the banking transactions, the download of credit card and debit card transactions, the invoices, and so all that transactional stuff is getting more and more automated all the time. And many business owners will put these systems in place, but they don't understand the impact. They maybe make all the technology work, but they don't understand the impact of invoicing rapidly and keeping inventory, sufficient but thin, and many, many other factors. So tools that not just do financial reporting, but also interpret the financials, I think have a real big benefit to the clients. And frankly, another thing, at the risk of sounding mean about it, and I'm not mean-hearted at all, is that many professional accountants have come up through the schools of compliance, of tax and auditor assurance, and they're not really thinking like CFOs or controllers. They're not used to helping people make those type of changes. So there's a bit of a learning curve to do that type of proactive advisory work. Now, all of that said, is it fun? Is it exciting? Can you have younger staff accountants do this work with the right tools? Absolutely. Because one of the misconceptions, Eric, that I know I learned, I used to think you had to have gray hair or no hair. Both of us are further along in that journey than we used to be.
Yeah.
But, I used to think you had to have about 15 or 20 years experience before you could really be a very good advisor because you just hadn't seen enough. But with the right platforms now, helping you surface the opportunities, all of a sudden it's like, huh, there's a problem and here's what you need to do about it. And the accounting profession is going to require far more communications skills than maybe some are comfortable with. But if you can do the communications right, you can be the business development person on advisory, and you can help the client with making wise decisions, helping them achieve their goals. Because in the bottom line, it doesn't matter what you, the firm, want, or you, the partner, wants, or you, the team member, wants. It's what the client needs and wants that matters in real advisory.
And yeah, and so that is exactly, where I think, and we're both of this champion of the, CEOs naturally park CPAs into this, um, transactional compliance. I call you on a fire burning kind of mindset. And I have, to my best of my ability, talk to friends or CEOs and go, hey, do you talk to a CPA about that? And the response I would get would be, well, I'm not looking to get a loan and I didn't blow a bank covenant or a tax problem. Why am I going to call my CPA on that? And so the perception is part of the things that we're beginning to try and overcome in this advisory role. And I think that we're at a dawn of a new age, of opportunity for now. Let's talk a little bit about why haven't accountants and CPAs had the opportunity to be better and want to be better advisors, because I know so many of us, that's why we went in the profession,
Mhm.
is that we could make a difference, that if there's anybody that can affect Main Street, or CPAs. So talk a little bit more, your thoughts on why we haven't been able to do that in the past, and now we have an opportunity to do it now.
Yeah, so there's actually multiple factors driving that as I see it, Eric. First off, the the client accounting services that were legacy, desktop-based products, you basically had a lot of handoff of files back and forth. The new software as a service, the browser-based accounting systems that are now working in the lower to mid market, enabled collaborative accounting. It also smoothed a lot of the overhead of transaction flows. Now, my rule of thumb, whoever is running the client accounting services system will see the opportunities first. They'll see excessive payrolls, too much inventory, that type of thing. So the reason the opportunity is surfacing now is the mechanics of the day-to-day operations on accounting are being solved with client accounting services. And the advisory products that can peek inside those systems now give you the opportunity to see, where those pieces of advice can be given. Now, the other thing we've actually already mentioned, many of us have grown up through tax or assurance, and we were buried because we've had more work than we can say grace over from a lack of talent, not enough people, if you want to think of it that way. But see, most accountants are quite intelligent, and as you said, many CPAs that I know got in knowing they could make a difference, and then they got bogged down in the day-to-day, you know, tax and audit world. Well, if you can rise above that and say, I'm going to focus my efforts on this advisory work, you can help people with lesser skills take care of all those transactional systems. You can make things like business tax returns flow through more rapidly. And in today's world with AI, you can make personal tax flow through more rapidly. So things that we used to have to do effort on are getting automated. So wait, all of a sudden, now we're getting some hours surfacing. And that's another part of it. So we're in this transition period of way too many hours have been used in doing the work, and the automations are making those hours available. And the tools that help us see the opportunities are now beginning to surface, the advisory tools.
And well, let's talk a little bit about that. So we're getting now the first wave of technology where all it is automating a lot of these processes.
Yep.
But there's still a bunch of firms that are struggling with how do I transition from compliance and transactional to a transformational mindset. And where do you think they're getting stuck? Because we've been talking about this for a decade plus. You got to move to advisory. You got to move to advisory. But with now the new injection of private equity coming in, you can't really put it back on the back burner anymore. You can't. And your billable hours through operational efficiencies with all this new technology, clients are going to see that and they're going to recognize lower, hey, this should cost you lower, cost me lower because it's taking you less time. Where do you see that they're getting stuck or struggling with? How do I now go to less precision based, is the way I kind of put it? Debits equal credits, it ties out, banks will reconcile, to now more, hey, it's in the ballpark of this. What are your thoughts on where people are struggling? And what are some of the ways and maybe even technologies, self-plug for impact data, can help them get to that?
Yeah. So to this question, Eric, I'm going to revert for just a moment because, mom always told me, no matter how busy you are, you can always find time for the things you want to do. And as I've watched people through the years, yeah, some people use their time watching baseball or football or, playing golf, whatever it is they do for pleasure. And a lot of people work way too many hours, way too much workaholic mentality around a lot of accounting profession. But if you're going to make time to do something new, you have to stop doing something that you're doing today. And for a lot of firms, they've been so dedicated to perhaps what I'd call not so good clients. If we want to use the classification, A, B, C, D, a lot of consultants have said you should, terminate the D relationships and, work to make B's into A's. And, you've heard those in other situations, I'm sure. But the real trick here is way too many accounting firms are undervaluing and undercharging for their services. So one of the quick ways that you can, improve the profitability of your firm, probably reducing your workload, is by charging more, which means that some clients will choose to go other places. But just as important, there are lower value things that you may be doing today that you can stop doing or shouldn't be doing, and you can have additional team members do those services. That's really true in client accounting services today. So the next thing that really makes this more doable is the platforms. All this automation, if you're thoughtful about it. And I've been a proponent, Eric, I think for 30-ish years at this point, a little over that, on workflow procedures, standardized operating procedures, if you will, that you do what you can to standardize everything. And one of the downsides of many firms right now is we've had too much mentality of doing it the partner way or the book of business way instead of the firm way. And if you begin taking the attitude that the client is a client of the firm and you as an individual is taking care of that client for the firm right now, notice I did not say you do all the work for that client. You take care of the client. And If you have to have some help with tax, or you have to have an audit done, or we need some client accounting services or HR services or wealth management, you get the right player to get that done. And in small firms, you're probably not going to have enough talent to do it. So you're going to have to build some referral relationships in your advisory practice. But what will happen is if you start doing that client-centric approach, that'll help. Number two is perhaps focusing on a particular area. Now, there's lots of niches that you could choose, and that might be not-for-profit or healthcare or any of a variety of those areas. Bloomberg says there's 30 different verticals like that CPA firms can focus on. But if you really get deep on, let's say, dentists, you're going to know everything that a dentist does, how they bill, what the systems are. You're just going to naturally know those things, and you can help that vertical industry so much more rapidly. Now, I don't encourage everybody to get completely vertically niched, because if you are a generalist firm, which many firms are, you can actually be a good generalist on advisory as long as you know which industries you're going to support in your geography. And my rule of thumb is there's always, and you pick it, HVAC, medical providers. Every community has certain types of businesses. Restaurants, let's say, is another one. And you can pick off the generalized businesses in your geography. And a lot of times you're going to have the relationship with those clients. And if you're helping everybody run their business better, everybody's going to be taking better care of their employees. It's a self-feeding cycle when you start doing that type of work. But just as important, I think you'll actually work less hours when you do this. So more profitable, less hours, and your clients, just as important, more profitable, less hours.
Man. Well, before we go, I know that everybody wants to get an idea of what new technologies, the next couple of minutes, what new technologies do you see coming that get you excited um, of, the possibilities
Mhm.
and transformational type of technologies that
Yeah.
you're seeing coming down that's not 10 years from now, like is in the realm of possibility coming soon.
Yeah. Well, almost everybody's using the AI word right away, which is true. But I'm going to back it up just a tiny bit, because I believe that the automations lead to a lot of the AI possibilities. And the way I'd like most of our listeners to your podcast here think about it is, if you break AI up into three levels, I think that's more appropriate. You got the Gen AIs, the large language models, the Chat GPTs, the Copilot 365s, the Claudes, that type of thing, which will help with productivity. But second, you've got tools that have AI built in that are leveraging it to get results. So your For Impact data platform, for example, has that, or Thomson Reuters has that with CoCounsel, or you've got BlueJay or Tax GPT and many, many, many others. By my tracking, Eric, almost 100 products with AI right now that are doing tax, audit, and CAS. But I only know very few products that are doing advisory, with you being one of those. Then beyond that, uh, agentic AI is the next major breakthrough, which is already in process. And I'd like for you to think about agentic AI, or agents, as kind of like your own personal assistant. So we're going to have these three levels of AI that will help. But first, we're going to get a lot of the transactional things done. So a phrase you've heard me say more than once, Eric, if an accountant is keying data, you've got a broken process. So, think about anything you've got in your compliance services, anything in tax or audit, or anything you've got in CAS. If you see data being keyed anywhere, fix that. That's a problem. Get your workflows really, really tight.
Yeah.
That will allow you to automate them more. That'll allow you to apply more AI. So that would be, the path that I'd be on. So when you say, okay, what really makes you excited about all this? Well, this is probably not 1 or 2 years out, but I do see the probability that we'll have a lot more Internet of Things rolling up into our accounting data. So we'll actually have much more real-time tracking that is going to be enabled by quantum. So that's probably a 5 or 7 year vision to get all that to happen. But to be ready for the future, we have to optimize the present. We have to get our workflows right. We have to get our automations right. We have to get our AIs right. And realistically, all you have to do is take one step. I don't care how far you think you are behind. If I can just get you to take one step or 2 steps today and rest and take 1 or 2 more steps tomorrow, I'm not asking you to run a marathon. I'm not asking you to, hike around the world. I'm just asking to take 1 or 2 steps right now. And that's how I think this will evolve. And it will become an even more automated world as I see it.
Well, man, again, I always enjoy our conversations because you are very much a optimist and, seeing the next waves of things. And, we'll have to do a part 2 of this, but, the thing that I always ask people and then, kind of the whole essence of codified wisdom is this idea too, is that if there was a point in time that you could go back in time and now the wiser Randy could go back and catch the younger Randy walking across a campus or and could pull you aside and say, hey, um, let me give you some advice that's going to save you a bunch of time and get you further faster. What do you think that would be?
Hmm. Well, it's almost like Back to the Future. Of course, love that movie to start with, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to interrupt the time continuum here, but as it turns out, I think there's a couple. Maybe I'm going to do one, but I think there's actually maybe a couple of things that come into play, and that is, fundamental principle: always do the right thing. Now, younger Randy, older Randy's always done
Yeah.
the right thing, right? But when it comes to learning quicker, it would be to be more thoughtful about my processes sooner and eliminate the time wasters in life. There's
Oh, yeah.
things that people are doing that are just, I'm going to really literally call them a waste of time. And younger Randy got the advice, if you're sitting around watching TV, you could be using that television time for something else. And I used to watch a lot more television than I do nowadays. And I realize
Yeah.
I might be less informed because of it. But choosing how to spend your time wisely is really tantamount. And that doesn't mean you're working all the time. You're thoughtful about how you're using your time. And if you're doing that every day, you will find that you'll get a lot further faster.
Man. Well, that is that is some incredible wisdom, and I think that applies to everybody. And so, um, you're right because we can get into those things that are very easy to suck in your time, and
Yeah.
so,
Social
well,
media, for example, what a great time suck. The 24-hour news cycle, what a time suck.
yeah, and they always tell you something new like every 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's the same thing over and over.
Yeah, it
Well,
really is.
well, man, hey, again, thank you so much for your time today. I hope that, if anything, that the people that are watching or listening, that there's been at least a couple of things that just may make a difference. And, because that's the whole purpose of the show is just, hey, share some lessons so that others can benefit from the experience of others. So, again, thank you for your time today. Hey, each week we come out with, another thought provoking lessons learned. And so, stay tuned for next week's episode of Codified Wisdom. In the meantime, be safe and, don't, make good use of your time, as Randy has mentioned today. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks to all. See you again.
Thanks for listening to Codified Wisdom with your host, Eric Eager. Want more? Subscribe and follow Codified Wisdom on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about Eric Eager and how 4Impact Data helps leaders get further, faster, visit 4impactdata.com.